are, hour number 3. Lots going on tonight. This is a very diverse program. We're going to talk about Russia and Vladimir Putin and that plethora of new revelations about these ultra-deadly weapons that the Russian research and development teams and industries have been working on, obviously nonstop for years. There's been no slowdown there, not at all. There's an essay up there, you'll see it under Phil Butler's name in guests, and it's entitled, formally, Putin's Assassin Nuke, a bad guy hunter by any other name. Let me read the first graph of this excellent article. It's in NEO, New Eastern Outlook. No U.S. Senate subcommittee has been established to study it. No Stratfor analyst is bleating about it. And no New York Times literary genius has reported it. Regardless of their negligence, though, the waking reality of Vladimir Putin's unstoppable assassin nuke is crystal clear. The U.S.-backed liberal world order is on notice now that Putin and Russia will get you, no matter what. If worst comes to worst, that is. No, Putin did not take aim at Florida residents or Mickey Mouse in his State of the Union address to the Russian Federal Assembly. His genius mastermind was instead, and has instead, sought and found a more meaningful target. Putin's super-secret Doomsday weapons are aimed at the world's deadliest enemies. Today in America, every news outlet is harping about Mr. Putin's killer nukes, weapons systems he says are unstoppable. Interestingly, the Russian president's most recent strategy seems to come as a surprise. But why should that be? After all, he and Russia have been under siege from Western maniacs for many long years now. For those who are reeling at figuring out his resolve, Putin's unflinching missile rhetoric is dead simple. The war of ideologies and energy distribution is not about Russians and Americans slaughtering one another. This new Cold War is a battle to the death in between Vladimir Putin, his allies, and the normal people of Earth, and a ghastly brotherhood hell-bent on enslaving the world. And you know who they are. What CNN viewers are witnessing today is a misinterpreted and convoluted idea of the clash of civilizations. As usual, CNN is lying. And then the article goes on to develop that theme more. So let's say hello to Phil Butler. Hello, and thanks for being here, Phil. It's early over there. I don't know how early it is. We don't even need to know where you are. Let's just say it's early.
Hi, Jeff. Good evening there where you're at. It's 7 a.m. here. And,
oh, good. I thought it might be 5. That's good. That's not so bad. Good.
It's not bad. It's a pleasure to talk to you. I've been a fan for many years. It's a little bit surreal to be on the show at this point, but it's fun.
Thank you, Phil. It's great to have you on because I really look for articles like you have written, intelligent articles that look at things in depth, honestly, and can draw connections between very important aspects. This story, as it broke in the Western media, how did it strike you? How did the Western media react to something, in your view?
Well, from an analyst's point of view, I know that a lot of these things probably, I know they don't surprise you too much, and certainly it didn't surprise me.
No.
Briskly, but right. Parts of the story actually did, like the revelations about some of these weapons. I mean, that some of these weapons have been around for a while, and certainly the Pentagon and people in the defense industry have known about them for some time. But the media's reaction to it, I'm not surprised at all because we've seen so much sensationalism from mainstream media.
Sure.
It's a little bit like, I guess all of us, when I say us, people that are in alternative media, or can't decide whether we're in an episode of Rocky and Bullwinkle or perhaps the Roadrunner cartoon.
Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? It's really nutty out there. You know, I remember, and you well remember, this is probably 4 years ago now, when that Russia Doomsday torpedo story was leaked accidentally on purpose at that meeting of the Russian military. That was a big story, and it didn't get much traction over here. It kind of came and went. Oh well.
Yeah, I think these things get washed over, pun intended there, as far as tsunamis are concerned. You rightfully have brought this to your listeners' attention in other episodes. I heard you talking the other day with a man about the cobalt aspect of a weapon like this status 6 torpedo we're talking about.
Yeah.
I think that, none of us can actually truly know, no matter how close you are in the circles where these things come up. None of us can know if the revelation by the Russian Ministry of Defense was leaked on purpose or whether it was an accident. I think it doesn't really matter at this point.
Agreed.
It's clear that the weapon does exist.
That's a hell of a weapon, too.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, I was listening yesterday or the day before when you talked with an expert about it being able. The weapon basically is a drone that carries out an attack mostly on its own. It's not really guided by wires or guided by like an operator, probably like a drone would be, a typical aerial drone. It's a scary weapon, I think, and it's been around for some time. It's actually the Status 6 is a modernization and advancement of the T-15 nuclear torpedo, which I think you probably know, Jeff, was almost created Armageddon during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
That's right. That's exactly right. They were going to the submarines there, the Soviet subs. They had 2 or 3 of them. I can't remember which, but they were 2 out of 3 skippers. I think were required to get the go-ahead on their own to launch one of these, and they had lost contact somehow, and these 3 skippers decided, I guess 2 out of 3 of them, or one of them, no, it had to be 3 out of 3, that's what it was, and the one guy held out. The one guy said, no, we're not launching. There may be a mistake with the communications or something we don't know. He held off, or that would have been it. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's, we end up going back, decades and decades. I feel like we're on a gerbil wheel or a hamster wheel sometimes, because it seems like we're reliving all these things over again. But, I think the complexion of this has changed a good bit, and which naturally changes the ideas of some of these weapons. What we're getting into here is that the Pentagon and the defense industry has known for some time about most of these weapons. But the Status 6, you rightfully sort of highlighted as the most deadly of these.
I'd say, just for our listeners real quick, it's a torpedo that can travel up to 3,000 feet deep in the ocean at 115, I guess, miles an hour. And it's got a range of over 6,000 kilometers, which is over 5,000 miles. It can go damn near halfway around the world underwater at such a speed that it would be virtually unstoppable. And it can carry up to a 100 megaton warhead, which is clad in cobalt-59. And if that were to go off, let's say 5-10 miles offshore, it would create deadly cobalt-60, which is the worst. But beyond that, it would create a tsunami over 1,600 feet high, 1,600 feet high, and maybe even a little higher than that, with a potential of punching inland 900 miles. You got to think about that. That's a game changer.
Yeah, I think everybody in the audience should try to get a visual of that. We've seen enough Hollywood to try the day after stuff. I mean, it's reality. It's another one of those Acme rocket things that could be real. I mean, and this, I think that the focus now, there's 2 things. One of the weapons that Mr. Putin announced is not one that has been revealed or that the Pentagon has not at some levels disclosed that they know about it. That's one aspect. But another aspect of all this is the the whole Putin situation. I mean, so I was reading about the possibility. This guy, Fred Weir, at the Christian Science Monitor, and he was studying a document called the Nuclear Posture Review, NPR, which is basically Mad Dog Mattis' report to President Trump about where we are in the nuclear weapons wise,
right,
and what they need to do. And it's a sort of a head wagging idiocy document where they talk about supplementing non-strategic weapons and strategic weapons. In other words, taking our Cold War weapons and either getting rid of them, building some brand new, spanking new, even more deadly ones, or boosting up the ones that we do have, or increasing them in numbers. Kind of more or less a huge arms race, or Cold War II, as it were. This Weir at Christian Science Monitor, even though it's a kind of a liberal attack on Trump in a way, there's some grains of truth in it. He calls the Nuclear Posture Review released by the Pentagon has been received with shock and even a touch of fear, because for the first time in almost 3 decades, it appears to talk about the possibility of limited nuclear war with Russia. Days after this NPR was released is when we saw the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia react accordingly. Mm-hmm. And certainly the circles that I travel in, or some of the sources that I have, reflect that this statement is pretty much true, that the Putin administration is reacted with these announcements more of fear and concern, and as a stopgap measure for something that they foresee that we don't hear about in the normal media in the West. In other words, that the Trump administration and some of these people that we frame as liberal world order, or whatever you want to call them, actually are considering a first strike or some type of.
It's on the table. They brought it all closer to a catastrophe by talking about it in those terms. You're right, totally right.
Yeah, I mean, I read the document. I know you probably have scanned it too. I know you're busy, and I know you don't have time, but you should read it. It's something out of Orwell. It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
the lingo uses. You know, if we, I don't know whether we should be crying or laughing, Jeff. It's like Mattis, you know.
Yeah.
Mattis, I think he comes forward, and I think if he had his way, he'd be working for mighty Xerxes. It'd be something out of the movie 300, where Mattis is leading the Persian hordes against Sparta. I can see Trump's hands on Putin's shoulders right now, saying, "If you'll only bow to me, I'll make you warlord of Asia," or something. It's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, and
Mattis is a case. Boy, he really is a case.
Well, I love the Marines. I was in the Navy, and we had shipmates who were Marines, and they're brave people, and they certainly do a great job. But you know, jarheads, you know, putting one. I don't know if it's the greatest idea in the world to put a jarhead in charge of the defense of the United States of America. I mean,
well, what he did in Fallujah, apparently, was he not in charge? That's my understanding of it.
Yeah.
Was
absolutely
pretty horrific, to put it mildly. People don't even know what happened there. It was just horrible. He had no problem exterminating people, none.
Yeah,
for generations. Okay.
Absolutely. When I think you help people, and I try to help people, I know that we're trying to get people to think for themselves. I mean,
right.
I catch a lot of flack, and I know you do too, because people suppose that you think you know everything, or that, you know, you have all the answers, or I have all the answers, or some other expert has all the answers. That's not the case. We're just trying to get people to look at these things and the ludicrousness of it and try to come to terms. The problem with all this is misinformation. The American people are great people. The Russian people are great people. All the things that we all wanted, you know, since we were kids, are still on the table. The problem is that people don't have the right information. That's why your show, or things that I write, or things that so many of these other people write or broadcast about, are so important. And it's muffled, you know. I mean,
It's muffled, absolutely. And let me say one thing. I've been doing this a long time, and very few programs go by that I don't learn something new myself, and that's the joy of this kind of work. I'm always learning. I don't know it all. Man,
yeah,
no
that's the best part about the human condition is that we pick up on these things. I got involved in all this, and probably mirrors the way you started getting in talk radio. You don't have any idea that's what you want to do, and somehow things transpire and take place. It's almost like it's destiny, So I'm looking at these things, and Putin's misunderstood. I wrote a book about it. I've studied this guy pretty in depth, and of course I can be wrong about some things too. But
tell us what you think. What's your take on Putin? Give us a good thumbnail.
Well, the cliche works. It's a little bit. Putin is a little bit. I think you can condense it down to he's Russia. It's like we like simplified things. Americans especially like things really simplified.
Sure.
Vladimir Putin's Russia. The cliche fits sometimes, and sometimes the cliche doesn't fit. I kidded earlier about Boris and Natasha, the Bullwinkle characters. Russia is certainly Boris and Natasha sometimes.
Right.
I mean, if you ask, what I've learned about this culture and these people and all of this geostrategy and stuff is just phenomenal the last 3 or 4 years.
Right.
The cliche, let's say, Putin is like, in his administration in Russia is like Boris and Natasha works because, which for those people too young and haven't seen the Bullwinkle show, they're caricatures of two Russian spies, Boris and Natasha, against Bullwinkle and Rocky. But Boris and Natasha works in Russia as applies to this story in the sense that any Russian will tell you that the mail in Russia does not work, that cars and some things just can't be created there that are durable and last. They don't work. Things mess up. It's a little bit of Three Stooges act, in some aspects, some of the bureaucracy. Then again, in Russia, you can't make a decent car sometimes, but you can give the average Russian some nuts and bolts and they can build a plasma rifle. So, that's kind of the way it is with Vladimir Putin. The guy, yes, he's a genius. Yes, he is a KGB, high-level KGB person. He's extremely sharp by everybody's estimation. What people don't realize, especially in America because of the propaganda, is that the guy's pretty square. He's one of the very few politicians that has never really been proven to lie.
I can't think of anyone else in his class. I cannot think of anyone else that I would say that about, and I appreciate you saying it because I believe you're 100% right. The guy is an honest, straight shooter, as straight as you're ever going to get at a power position like that on this planet.
Absolutely, Jeff. You're right. I mean, and this is how we have to analyze all these things very minutely, but at the same time we have to have the generalization. Is he a good guy or is he a bad guy? I mean, if I'm a Russian, he's a great guy because amongst all the leaders in the world, he's been concerned about what he should be concerned about.
Right.
Yes, the Russian people. He's not concerned about, he doesn't hate Americans. He has a clear affinity for Americans. Every Russian I talk to has a wonderful affinity for Americans. I never hear anything bad. Certainly they get upset and mad and feel hurt because of a lot of this rhetoric that goes around. But so Putin's a square shooter. Certainly he does things like every leader in that league would have to. Maybe he orders somebody killed. Who the heck knows? But these decisions have to be made. But amongst the leaders of the world, Vladimir Putin is a straight shooter. He's never been proven wrong. 99% of the allegations or assertions against him and the Russians have been proven to be false.
But they're concocted, completely fake. Yeah. It makes me sick to watch the Western media, the Western Zionist media, crank this garbage out about the man. It's just Absolutely. A lie. The whole anti-Russia, the Russophobe thing is a creation, a concoction out of nothing.
Absolutely, Jeff. You know this, and you talk about it a lot. You're trying to tell people, think. And the funny thing about this is I have friends, too, and I talk to them. I'm talking like I'm talking to you and to your listeners. I'm talking now, and we're being normal people, good Americans. We're just talking like two guys about how things appear to be and how they are.
Right.
But what happens is you and I get off of your show. We say, "Oh, what a nice it was," blah blah blah, talk, and then we go out and we're inundated with misinformation. And it has an effect. Ad nauseum has its effect repetitively. My friends, I talk to them and they agree with me. And we talk reason. We talk about these missile systems. We all know these things have existed for decades. We know that both sides are prepared to eradicate the other side. But then we get through talking, me and my friends, and then they go off to work or wherever they might be, or they're listening to TV shows, watching CNN. And then their attitude changes. It goes back to the Russians are coming, that convenient villain that we have to have. We don't have to have, but the people that are trying to tell us what we need to do or what they want us to do, they have to have that convenient villain.
Well, you just nailed it when you said that there's a condition. I would call it almost an intellectual disease, which is promulgated by the mainstream media, and that disease could be called the ad nauseum disease, because it works.
It works. I mean, it's Rense, the guy that founded public relations, basically, and I was a public relations expert, supposedly. I mean, you just repeat it over and over again. That's why the commercials work. That's why the soap operas, all the things the ad guys came up with is gone crazy now. So back to these weapons and what Mr. Putin announced.
Let's hold on, Phil, right there. It's a perfect place to pause. I got to do a little break at the bottom of the hour here. Right. Then we'll come back and talk about these weapons that were revealed and see if we can enlighten our listeners a little bit more about their capabilities. Some of them pretty awesome. Be right back in a minute. Okay, and we are back talking with Phil Butler about Vladimir Putin. At this point, will probably always feel that in my lifetime, other than John Kennedy, this is the greatest international statesman probably of our age. He has never missed a beat, never missed a step. And what I am concerned about more and more is everybody has limits. And I wonder how close we are to getting toward the end of Vladimir Putin's limits, his patience, his tolerance. He is a man of greatest integrity, but everybody's got limits. And I know that the West, the Zionist West, the American West, is constantly probing and pushing and testing to find out what his soft spots are. So far, they haven't found any that I know of. What do you think? You there,
Jeff?
Phil?
Yeah, I'm here, Jeff. I'm here. There's a little lag there. This is a really good point to make. Thanks for making it too, because I think people need to try to frame this in the right way. Frame all this happening in the right way. It's this media madness. I don't know. I'm sure that you would agree with me that I had in 60-something years, I don't remember any leader, feature, movie star, no entity of any kind, and no verb, vowel, adjective, or noun that has been talked about, at least negatively, more than Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
I agree. Completely inverse to what the situation should be and what the situation warrants. Completely inverse to it.
Yeah, it's like, I study the Crimea situation, Ukraine. I mean, the story is too big, Jeff. I mean, I know you get into this. It's impossible to talk about all this after you've studied so long. But if we take it back to, I think the reason your statement there is appropriate now is because the Russians, Vladimir Putin, are back into a corner. I mean, what else can they do?
Everywhere you look, they've got them boxed in. They're definitely pushing. Yeah, it's
the big game, the great game, from geography time. It's the same situation encircling Russia. I think we have to look at the purpose of all of it. We don't have a lot of time on any show or in any article or even a book to describe what's going on completely. But I think these weapons, Mr. Putin's reaction, I think it's significant that he comes on international TV before his own people, before the people of the world, and says, listen to us. He's really at a point. Listen to us. I'm not bluffing. And what does that mean? I mean, he's clearly not a madman. He's a pragmatist. If he wanted to take over Ukraine would already be Russian. It would be a 1 week affair.
Correct.
NATO could not do anything except a limited nuclear strike against Russia. Everybody knows that. We've known that for decades. He hasn't done that. He didn't do this. The Olympic Games were trashed. He's trashed. His daughter's trashed. Everybody in his administration trashed. All of the oligarchs that are like our Western versions, our technocrats, they're oligarchs. They're all trashed. Everybody's trashed, and still nothing's been attacked. There's no American been killed by Vladimir Putin, not one. In fact, I can't remember any Americans ever being killed by any Russians, except for in counterinsurgency warfare in Southeast Asia or something.
I think you're right. I think that's a very, very interesting observation. I had not thought about that. Yeah.
Since when did they kill one of us?
Right.
Since when did they invade Florida? So the whole Crimea situation it's very much like strategically, the United States, the Pentagon, the powers that be, the lizards in charge, the liberal world order, whatever you want to call these people, these psychopaths that run the show, they knew exactly what Vladimir Putin was going to do, and then they used it against him. Putin knew that he knew. It's crazy. Crimea, how can it's like the Warsaw Treaty Organization, which was basically the Warsaw Pact, the Soviet Union, the western side of the Soviet Union, dissolved. It was dissolved when the wall came down. NATO was not dissolved. NATO kept moving forward. In missile terms, Kharkov, or the Donbass, which has been the point of contention in this whole Ukraine situation, is just seconds from Moscow.
Right.
So in effect, what our leaders have done is done Hitler's Barbarossa, which was the invasion of the Soviet Union in World War II, with economic and supposedly peaceful means. The objective to put our missiles and NATO as close to Russia as possible. And I think you've already talked about this many times about the Rothschilds and the banksters and these people that wanted to carve up Russia. We all know that the predominance of energy left in the world, many of the resources and most of the potential, natural resources wise, left on this rock we live on are in Russia and Iran, ironically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brazil's gone. We've chopped Brazil down. There's nothing there. The mahogany tables from Haverty's, excuse me, guys, but you do make mahogany tables. It didn't come from the United States. It came from Madagascar and Brazil, and it's all gone. So what we're looking at here is the threshold of Armageddon.
We are, absolutely. All that's left of Brazil is debt. The Brazilians even laugh. They say that if we don't own our country, the bankers do. They know. Yeah. They know they've been looted. They've been raped. Vladimir Putin has made it quite clear to the people of Donbass that he will not tolerate their annihilation. He will come in.
Yeah.
He's made it clear.
Absolutely.
So that is another trigger point. Now, just yesterday or the day before, the U.S. announced it was going to put 400 more supposed ABMs, anti-ballistic missiles, around Russia. We all know that these are offensive weapons. They're not defensive weapons. We know this. It's just, it makes me sick that the public is so deceived by this. This is an absolute effort to push that man as far as they possibly can without actually shooting at him. And,
absolutely, Jeff, you're right. It's a provocation for war. That's what the whole thing's been about anyway. Yes. If it weren't for Putin's pragmatism, we'd already be at war.
Absolutely.
We would absolutely already be at war. And, going back to these weapons, what hardly anybody's caught, I'm sure you already know it. When I say it, you'll say, yep, I was about to talk about that, is the weapon that was not made a big deal out of is the one that's the real indicator here.
Oh, that's the awesome weapon. Yeah, go ahead.
The assassin nuke that I talked about. I mean, I was in the Navy and I was involved in some of this stuff. And, the Status 6 weapon, these experts that you hear talking, they don't know what they're talking about. They're saying the same guys that tell you that burning down the rainforest doesn't have any effect on our climate, the scientists that, in quotations, that talk about these things are saying, oh, you can't create a tsunami by detonating 100 megaton, which would be the second largest weapon ever detonated under the surface of the sea. You can't do that. Well, in fact, the United States Navy tested creating wave weapons in World War II. And in 1917, a town in Nova Scotia was decimated by a conventional explosion that created the tidal wave. I mean, so by Putin showing that these weapons, I mean, he knows that the defense community knows about them, but he also knows that the average people don't think about these things. He's trying to warn us. He's begging. He's saying, please pay attention to me. The people that are leading you are going to get us all killed.
That was one of the most, real quick, don't lose your thought. To me, that was one of the most moving, powerful, poignant addresses that I've ever seen by anyone. It was incredible. And
it was like that one, Jeff. You remember the last address of Dwight D. Eisenhower, where he talks about the military?
Sure.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I play that over and over again, and I'm amazed that people don't just go, wow, he really said that? You go, yeah, he predicted we're in this situation.
Yeah.
Going back to the weapons, though, I mean, Status 6 is an awful weapon. It's a third strike weapon. The T-15 torpedo that was the predecessor to this was an offensive weapon. Mm-hmm. A third strike weapon is a weapon. This is kind of indicative of the whole situation. What Putin's saying is here, and our experts will agree too, it's a third strike weapon. It's not a first strike thing. It's a third strike weapon for many reasons. Third strike means that the first strike of the United States, for instance, knocks out the capability of Russia to have a second strike. A third strike weapon is a doomsday weapon that says, okay, you killed us all. We can't do anything, but it's a deterrent because you're still going to die. This drone's going to wander around out there until it finds an opening, and it's going to do what you didn't want it to do. So therefore, don't attack us. It's simple. Third strike weapon. Mm-hmm. What that means, it means several things, but what it means is that the Russians are afraid of a first strike. And Putin is saying, we have this, people. If you attack us, and you may kill us, but you're going to die. Secondarily, the weapon that is not discussed is the one I called the assassin nuke. And CNN and the rest of these guys made a big deal about Florida looking like it was targeted. That was purposeful. Yes, Boris and Natasha do live in Russia, but they're not idiots. They showed Florida being attacked with a new type of weapon for a reason, not to make the people in Florida at Walt Disney World leave, to say your leadership has a golf course in Florida. The New World Order is all over the world. And we said this many people ask us, what's the strategy you would come up with if you wanted to deter a lot of the stuff's going on? And we've talked, and you probably have talked about this too. The strategy should be for Putin, I'm not going to kill the people. I'm going to kill the people that beset us with all these problems. Mm-hmm. All of my assassins, all of my nuclear weapons, everything we've got is going to be targeted at the New World Order. If you defeat me, if I die or if I get assassinated, or if you take over Russia, try to take over Russia, we're not coming after the American people or some retiree in Omaha, Nebraska. We're coming after you, and you're going to die. And that brings to point this new assassin weapon that I call it, because they've had this. It's funny, they have a contest now to name this weapon. Well, the assassin weapon is, of course, you have the Avangard hypersonic weapon that you mentioned, and Satan II, which is capable of blowing up Texas or France or the UK.
Right.
Yeah, which is awful. But the most awful weapon that was not mentioned, is not mentioned in this Mattis report to Trump, even though they know about it, is what's known as a SLAM missile, which is basically a supersonic low altitude missile powered by a nuclear ramjet engine. Well, what that means is that it's a nuclear weapon that's powered by a nuclear reactor that can fly indefinitely. You saw this in Putin's demonstration, and nobody made a big deal about it. But that's the biggest deal of all, because this is like the ultimate weapon. If you're gonna do what I just suggested, say my theory is Putin's theory, and I've been told by some people that I know high up in the Russian world of things that this is a good analysis. The report, part of the report that you were reading at the top of the hour, that it's a good analysis of what's taking place. Putin is saying, okay, we've got this particular weapon, and I can put it out there, and it can fly around until it finds an opening, and wherever you live, whether you live in Arkansas in a bunker somewhere, or whoever you might be, or deep underground underneath a winery somewhere in France, this weapon will keep flying around until, no matter what happens to me, until it finds an opening and you're done. Regardless of that, I mean, people say, well, okay, some experts say that it's impossible to create a nuclear-powered ramjet. But it's already been done. Project Pluto in 57 to 64 created these ramjet engines that were,
right.
I mean, think about that. 1957 and 1964, actually 1969, because they didn't stop when they said they did, they create a nuclear-powered engine that can fly an airplane or a rocket or whatever, or
right,
indefinitely.
It was Charlie Smith was on the other night. We talked about that. It had one big flaw. It spewed deadly radiation in the early days, and that's why they officially, in quotes, had to retire the program. It was too dirty, but they've got that pretty well cleaned up. You have a great paragraph in your essay here. Let me just read this real quickly. Looking at the Russian president's presentation. Oops, my screen went out. Hold on, let me just do this again. This is
okay.
Looking at the Russian president's presentation the other day and carefully listening to his words, watching his body language, there's no doubt the Russian aerospace defense forces possess just such a weapon. But those interested should also take note. The visual of Donald Trump's country club at the Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida carried the most important message. Putin's cryptic signal to Trump, the Clintons, the Rothschilds, and to the military industrialists was barefaced. Quote, even if you destroy us, our deadliest weapons will seek you all out indefinitely. End quote. And this Putin showed once again his genius and indomitability. Win or lose, the bad guys are going to die. Period. They're going to get it. That's the point.
Yeah, I believe that's the point, Jeff. I mean, you can see the logic of it. Anybody that knows anything about Russian culture, about who these people are, this is who they are. They're not going to lose. I mean, they don't want to dominate the world. I think we can see clearly that what does Russia need? What does Russia need with Europe, or the United States for that matter?
No, they've got it. Russia's a gigantic country. Most Americans don't have any idea how big it is and the resources there. One thing the Russians said, and I don't know who said it, but it was a soldier, and he said, Russian soldiers know how to die.
Yeah.
Unlike any other soldiers, they fight and they die, and they know how to do their best, and it is awesome. They're amazing people. Different.
Yeah, they are amazing. And this doesn't make us any less amazing, Jeff.
No,
that's the whole point. We get into these differences. We always get into that. When I was taught, and I know you were too, we come from a generation that you played sports. You weren't looking to just get an easy way. You wanted to find the toughest competitor you could find and see the excellence in that competitor, and then somehow prevail. And that was the indicator of what you were. That's what Americans were about.
Right.
Now we're about something else. We have to talk about how messed up the Russians are. Yeah, they're messed up. So are we. But when we get down to these things, this guy's not bluffing. There's no bluff in him. If he's telling you he's got something that can kill you, you've got something that can kill you. And the greater point is, why is he saying this? Why we're talking about our internally, Trump versus Clinton and so forth and so on. We're looking at good cop, bad cop. I think it's clear. The strategy is the same. We see an administration change and something's supposed to change in the situation in domestically and geostrategically with other nations, and the talent is supposed to improve, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
We've had decades and decades of supporting failure. Americans don't like to fail. I wasn't taught to fail. If I failed, I got fired. We're still employing people that fail continually. We're propped up by things that take this discussion into a much deeper, too broad situation. But, we're taught that we're kept placated by what we perceive as okay, or that we're doing fine. But deep down inside, we know we're not fine. When we're on the threshold of thermonuclear annihilation,
which is exactly where we are, friends.
Yeah. And
how many major flashpoints are there right now? I count 6 or 7 easy.
Yeah, at least there's 7. Yeah, and I mean, and we're saying, okay, other people, naysayers are going, oh, come on, he doesn't have this. Yes, he just tested it. I'm looking at a report right now. Russian flight tests of the weapon, successful or not, might offer one explanation about reported spikes in the amount of radioactive iodine-131 in the atmosphere, appearing to originate from Russia's northwestern Kola Peninsula.
You remember the reports, ladies and gentlemen, of isotopes over Europe? Okay.
Yeah. It's amazing how much stuff you know, Jeff. How do you remember all this stuff? I'm having to read this. Come on. But anyway, it's a byproduct of a nuclear fuel, a nuclear engine fuel. I mean, they know this. So Lockheed Martin in 2014 announced that they're developing a small fusion reactor, which is what this is powered by. Mm-hmm. I mean, we can only naturally assume that since the Russians have had these weapons since the 60s, that maybe they improved upon them, just like we've improved upon our weapon systems.
Right.
But the greater issues is things you've tried to call to your listeners' attention and that they're thinking about now, which is a good thing. But I think, we have to call a stop to this, Jeff. Sometime we have to call a stop to it, or it's going to happen. Somebody's going to make a mistake, and then Mr. Putin's doomsday weapons are going to wash ashore, in Georgia, or maybe Alabama. I guess it's Alabama, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you have a 500 meter tall tidal wave, I think it probably goes well into Alabama or further.
It's a 900-mile potential, depending upon the topography. Yeah. Oh yeah. And it'll scrub the land clean. There'll be nothing left to speak of.
And I'll never forget. I was a geography teacher for a spell there.
Uh-huh.
And I remember when 9/11 happened. I thought, I was in amazement because I'm watching these buildings fall down. I was just like, oh my God, what is this? But the kids in the class that were 13, 14 years old, I was most appalled not by the attack, but by the attitude of the children, who are now grown, by the way. They thought that Bruce Willis was going to come to the rescue. They thought it was another Die Hard. They didn't believe it. They've been so glued to the idiot box that they literally did not understand that people were really dying. And so these same people are now, I guess they're running for Congress. I don't know.
Probably. Yeah. Yeah, it's not a real world for those and many others now. It's a virtual world, and it can almost be shaped to their liking. It's really strange out there now. Very scary when you think about it. Phil Butler, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, so much for having me on.
Oh yeah, I'd like to have you on again. Just keep those great articles coming, and we'll talk again.
Thanks, Jeff, and best of luck to you. And
Okay.
say hello to the family and everybody.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
I love listening to you, man.
Thank you for the kind words, my friend. All right, you take care, Phil. Great to have you on. Okay, that's our program tonight. That's Mr. Phil Butler, and his essay is right there. Very astute observations. Very clean and clear. They're right there. Okay, back with you tomorrow night. Take good care.